Is trouble coming? Are we going down? Mother, daughter, and your brother too. Get your mind straight when it's up to you. Hey, you gotta see the storm a-coming. Hey, you gotta feel it coming through. Hey, you gotta see the storm a-coming. Whoa, it's coming after you.
Hello, this is Greg Seagroves. I'm the host of Reflections with Uncommon Common Man. Today's date is June the 22nd, 2020. I'm here with my co-host Jimmy Catrone and Pat Doughtie. He's been a guest with our show several times. And then there's Connor McDaniel, our producer. I want to get started by getting right into some stuff here. We all talked the last time about how we felt about the death of George Floyd. We've had another shooting since then in Atlanta, Rayshard Brooks. And, first of all, I have mixed emotions about this. There's no comparison between what happened in Atlanta and what happened in Minneapolis. First of all, I'll go straight to you, Pat. What are your feelings on this? Do you think the guy screwed up, or is this?
Well, I'll put it like this. I have mixed feelings about it as well. I don't know 100% of the facts until it actually goes to trial. But I've been in similar situations. When you have someone that's willing to fight the police and then take a taser from them and run and turn and point it at them to shoot them, there are instances, several of them, where this has occurred and they've tased an officer, took control of their weapon, and shot him.
Yeah.
Little bits and pieces of the story keeps coming out. And part of it that I recently had read was the second officer, because everyone's yelling, well, you had his driver's license, you had his car, you had a second officer, so there's no way that officer could have had his other weapon stolen and shot. But the other officer came out that he had a concussion. He was on the ground. He'd been fighting, the two of them had been fighting with this guy. So who knows? If this guy is willing to fight the police and steal one of their weapons and turn and point it at them, my opinion, good shoot.
Well, now, which officer had the concussion? Was it the guy that actually shot the guy?
No, the other one.
Oh, okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now, he's the one that wasn't close to Rayshard when the taser was fired, right?
Right.
Okay. Now, the other question I have, I've watched the film, but I haven't really been able to make my mind up. There's only two shots from a taser, right? Okay.
Yes.
Now, did he fire both of them?
I don't believe so, from my knowledge.
Okay.
But that's just going from what I understand at this time.
Right. So, as long as he didn't fire the other one, he's still a threat. He
is still a threat.
Right.
In my opinion, he remains a threat.
Right.
Yeah. Now, if he hadn't have stolen the taser and he ran off, sure, I have your name, I have your driver's license and your car. I'll pick you up later. No big deal. You already failed the DUI test.
Right.
No big deal. But he remains a threat at this point because he has a weapon. Honestly, it could go either way. And I don't want to take up too much time with this, but
well, I'm not take as much long as you want. I mean, because
I've been involved in a situation where I got called to a home, and it was one that I was familiar with and had arrested one of the occupants prior to, a young kid. It was a domestic assault, and someone had been stabbed. So I already know there's a weapon involved, and someone's willing to use it. On the way there, we got an update, I'm running 33 traffic with lights and sirens. I have my backup. As I'm turning on the street, I see him coming down the hill, so I know he's very close behind me. There was an update stating that there were 2 men in the front yard. I forgot the weapon now. One had another weapon and was swinging it at the other. So, and this was reported from the neighbor. Generally speaking, when you get close to a situation like that, or to the address where you're responding to, you unbuckle your seatbelt and you're ready to jump out. Well, I was so focused on all the content that was coming across the radio, and as soon as I turned,
you told me about this.
Yeah. And I turned on the street and I looked up ahead to the house that I was thinking I was going to, and sure enough, there's 2 men in the front yard. I wasn't thinking about taking my seatbelt off or anything, and as I was approaching the house and trying to stop the vehicle and do all that good stuff, the guy that I was there for turned, saw me, turned around, started running towards the back of the house, and then stopped, turned around, pointed a gun at me, and started charging my car. I hadn't even stopped yet. So I'm trying to stop the car, throw it in park, take my seatbelt off, and draw my weapon all at the same time. And everything happened so quick. I get out of the car and I'm screaming at him to drop the gun. And thankfully, generally a situation like that, high stress, your adrenaline's running, tunnel vision, all you're focused on is the threat. Well, thankfully I heard his dad yell, "It's not real." Well, it looked real. And so I'm yelling at him, "Drop the gun," and he throws it towards me, and I could hear plastic hit the ground and slide across the pavement. So I run over and jump on him and, cuff him and drag him to the car. Now here comes my backup. So all that happened in a matter of just a few seconds. Mm-hmm. And the grand jury and the district attorney all agreed that had I shot him, I'd have been justified, just pointing a gun at a cop. So using that analogy, I'm thankful I didn't shoot him because it ended up being an airsoft pistol.
Was this a white guy or black guy?
It was not. It was an Asian guy.
Asian guy.
Yeah. And I'm sure I'd have caught grief over that too, but, because he wasn't white.
Right.
But the thing is that we're constantly placed in situations like that, and people don't understand how often. It's very frequent. And we're all human. Yes, we're trained. And we're trained for that split second, taking that second to evaluate, do I pull the trigger or don't I pull the trigger? Thankfully, I didn't, because I'd be living with that today, even though, it could have been real. This same scenario, this officer here, he was faced with a split-second decision. Could he have not pulled the trigger? Absolutely. And that's why I say I'm still on the fence about it, because I don't have 100% of the details yet. But my opinion, that officer had already been in a fight with this guy. He stole his weapon, and now he's threatened with potentially being tased and his weapon taken away and used on him.
Yeah. Well, the bottom line here too is, and this guy goes back to the old thing I can't preach on enough. If you comply, you will not die.
That's exactly right.
Right. And this guy, he upped the ante. It wasn't these police officers. These guys were as professional and nice as you could be prior to trying to put those cuffs on this guy.
Right.
And
Pat, in the eyes of law enforcement, taser is the same as a gun, right?
Well, Georgia law, what I understand, it's considered a deadly weapon.
It's considered. It's not technically.
Yeah.
Were there defective ones, prior to? Yes. Where they caught on fire, what have you. But it's not. It's not like that anymore. They're very effective, generally speaking. Unless somebody's on drugs, then they're zero effect on those.
But it's just like what we were discussing before, though. It's just like just because you're unarmed don't mean you're not dangerous.
No, absolutely not.
You take Mike Brown in Ferguson, Missouri.
Exactly.
He was twice as big as that cop, and they had already been in a fight.
Right.
And Mike Brown, which was charging toward him, he shot him. If Mike Brown had got a hold of that cop, he could have took that weapon away from him and killed him.
But also,
Absolutely.
there's been instances where you get tasered in the chest, and we've had fatalities.
Yeah, I'm not aware of too many of those, but
But it has happened. I
It
heard.
has happened. Yeah.
Or you could get shot in your eye or something.
Sure,
You know,
absolutely.
you could be blinded.
That has happened.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's possible. There's a number of things that could happen there, but the main thing, that weapon is used for incapacitating a suspect. The vast majority of the time, it incapacitates them, and it gives you long enough to be able to jump on them, put handcuffs on them, and control the situation. And likewise, there are instances where cops' tasers were taken from them, they were tased, and they were shot with their own weapon. And knowing that, I mean, we go into every situation not knowing what's going to happen. Generally speaking, those on the other side, they're formulating a plan. Now, we're taught to formulate plans as well. If this happens, I'm going to do this. If this happens, we're constantly formulating plans of escape for our own safety, just in case we're attacked. But they generally know when they're going to attack. So we're left to respond. There's nothing we can do up until that point. Our hands are tied in a lot of scenarios, a lot of situations where, all we're left to do is react. That's it. So we react to.
Well, you eliminate as much as you can as you're doing it.
Absolutely. We attempt to. It doesn't always work, and it's we kind of joke amongst ourselves. Generally speaking, they don't want to go to jail worse than we want to catch them. If you're running, generally speaking, most cops don't care to chase after a bad guy unless it's something extreme. So their I guess desire to get away is more intense than our desire to take them to jail, if that makes any sense. Mm-hmm. And likewise, 9 times out of 10, we can always catch them later anyway. But
a lot of it depends too on like, I'm assuming that when you stop somebody, I know this to be the case, y'all have a lot of information about that person that's given to you by dispatch, and if you got a known hardened criminal that's a serial killer or whatever, that's gonna mean you're gonna chase that dude a lot more.
Yes.
Than somebody who's maybe just DUI or whatever.
Right. Or even just, maybe stole a candy bar from the liquor store or whatever, Yeah, you're absolutely correct. And generally speaking, if dispatch has the information for us when we're running a tag, because we always call the tag out before we exit the vehicle, we're getting some sort of feedback. Mm-hmm. The vast majority of the time, even if they're a handgun carry permit holder, they make us aware of that. And, so when we approach the car, it's like, I know you're a handgun carry permit holder. Yeah. If you have a weapon on you, please don't reach for it. Mm-hmm. Your safety and mine.
Yeah.
But going back to what you said, if you don't fight, mm-hmm. nothing's going to happen.
And nothing's going to happen.
Yeah.
But I think people I'm blown away that you got 3 things going on here. He resisted arrest. Mm-hmm. He took the taser, mm-hmm. and then he turned and fired on the officer. You got three distinct actions that he took, and it's amazing. Now you got a guy on a murder charge.
Well, the bottom line,
I can't believe it.
The bottom line here is I think this guy may walk because they overcharged him.
Oh, they did.
Yeah,
they and that DA, murder. Himself, he's under.
They gave him felony murder, didn't they?
Yeah.
Right. Please explain what felony murder is and why this is ridiculous.
Well, you have to have that premeditated intent for one, which no cop does. We don't walk up on a scene going, I'm going to shoot this guy, I'm going to kill him. You have to have that intent in order to prove a felony intent to kill somebody. You can't prove that with cops, generally speaking, because like I said before, it's generally, with us, it's reactionary. We're reacting to whatever force that we need to.
Yeah, you didn't go in there to kill somebody.
No, absolutely.
Well, does DA typically up the charges, expecting it to get reduced to
Yes,
manslaughter
yeah.
anyway.
Yeah, they generally do that.
So
they
that
charge
could
with,
be the tactic anyway.
absolutely.
You know.
So
And-
maybe the plan all along was to get this guy to give his partner a concussion and then have him steal the taser.
Yeah, right.
It was all part of the plan,
It-
and it was premeditated.
I think it was. I don't know. Looking at the video, it's ridiculous. Now, and I'm just going to throw this out here because a lot of people don't even realize that cops do not want to shoot anybody.
No.
I mean, that's the last thing on our brains. We don't go into situations wanting to shoot someone. And like I said, we're reacting to whatever we're having confronted with that we're having to deal with. If someone wants to fight us, obviously we're going to fight them back because I'm not going to stand there and allow someone to beat on me. In our force continuum, whatever the bad guy has, we're allowed to one up them. So if they have their fist, we can pull out our ASP, we can pull out our pepper spray, we can pull out our taser. Those are, 3 different levels of force. We don't have to match them for whatever. If they, pull a knife, I don't have to pull my knife. I can pull my gun. I can go straight to my gun. And like I said, I don't ever go into a situation looking to harm someone. I'm just reacting, and of course, I'm going to protect myself. I'm going to protect my partners or any other innocent bystanders. So it's
even in a justified shooting where it's just obvious, cut and dry. Look what all you got to go through.
Oh, it's a
administratively.
headache. Absolutely.
They're going to take your gun away from you. You're going to be sitting at a desk for a few days and
months.
Well, probably months.
Some I've known that sat at a desk for a year before they were ever cleared. And some longer than that. 18 months is the longest I can recall.
And you probably don't get paid your regular salary.
No, you do.
Oh, do you?
Now, depending on the circumstances and the situation, sometimes they're relieved of duty without pay.
Right.
But generally speaking, if it's something that's in question as to whether or not it was a good shoot, bad shoot, generally speaking, an officer will continue receiving pay.
But nobody in their right mind wants to go through that.
No.
And especially what this cop's going through right now.
Absolutely. And his poor stepmother gets fired from her job for having an opinion. My understanding from what I read was that the company she worked for found out that.
And see, that's another way they're silencing us.
Absolutely.
Because they're threatening us with our jobs. What is the difference between? And I wrote this in an article, not too long ago. It's like the 1963 Birmingham Children's March. The reason they call it the Children's March is because the parents were too scared they were going to lose their jobs if they went out and demonstrated.
Right.
Okay, so the children went out and did it for them. Okay, but that's what you have when a particular group of people have been silenced, and that's what they're working for. That's all part of an aim.
Exactly right.
I want to go to another thing. I was listening on the way in. I was listening to a talk show, and they were talking about this author. Now, if you don't want to go in this direction, we'll, you don't have to answer anything. Right. But I know, being in the military and being in the Guard and all that, I've known a lot of police officers over the years, and especially working in mall security, I've known a lot of police officers. Occasionally, I do run across police officers that I think are not good. I mean, they're there probably shouldn't be a police officer, by the way they talk. And I remember one time, it's been years ago, when I was in the Guard, there was a motorcycle officer, and they'd sit around telling war stories and everything. And he was just going on and on about how he was going to retaliate on this Cheatham County deputy because he stopped him because he had the nerve to pull him over doing 90 mile an hour through Ashland City. Okay,
I pulled him over too.
And I'm thinking, are you some kind of an idiot? I mean, you're going to retaliate against some guy that did his job. You know, what if that had been you pulling somebody over doing about 90 mile an hour?
Absolutely.
And this guy, I think the name of his book or name of his organization is something like Dark Blue or something like that. I can't remember exact title, but the reason he called it Dark Blue, he's a former police officer too, and he said it's his goal to target. He's within the police department. I've seen this. With my own eyes. There's a tendency of police officers many times to protect their own, so to speak, even the ones that are not doing, they're not up to par.
Right.
Do you agree with that, or?
I do to a certain degree. I will say this, and I'm not the first one to admit this. There are officers that should not be officers.
Right.
They're in it for the wrong reason. Who knows? Some of it could be this ego trip that, hey, I was bullied as a kid or whatever, and I'm going to pay everybody back. So they go for a badge.
Right.
They're few and far between, but they're there. And then you have the ones that are just, outright buttheads, and it doesn't matter who they're in contact with, they're jerks.
Right.
And that's not what we're taught anymore. We've got it's called community-based policing.
Right.
So it's more of a community relationship, building relationships within the community rather than, us being looked at as the bad guys. What was the second part of that? Because I had something to say on that one.
I can't remember now.
You're talking about protecting their own.
Yeah, protecting their own. Yeah.
And that's where that thin blue line comes in, right? And it's usually placed between two black lines, saying that there's we're small in number opposed to the masses, and to protect your own. That used to be the mentality among police, and it wouldn't matter what you witnessed another officer doing, you would not tell on them. I mean, you would be a disgrace to the department if you did. Anymore, it's not like that. There are some that would refuse to turn on their fellow officers in blue, but the vast majority of cops that I know today, if they would witness something that was either illegal or immoral or unethical or anything against us as far as making us look bad, the vast majority of officers I know would most definitely speak up.
Right.
Not only to that officer, but to the superiors.
Right.
And it goes on constantly, which, everyone says, weed out the bad ones, weed out the bad ones. Well, you don't know they're bad until they actually do something bad and someone witnesses it, or it's brought to the attention of the administration.
Right.
And generally speaking, something like that, it would take multiple complaints, similar complaints from the community, or even a fellow officer before something's done. And then they're either going to go through remedial training, or they get, some sort of administrative action against them, or they get fired.
Right.
And it happens frequently.
Right.
When it's witnessed. So it's not like we're not policing ourselves, because we are this day and age. Not like, you take 30 years ago. I mean, if someone saw another cop actually murder someone, nobody would speak up. You'd have to prove it.
Well, I'm going to mention this, and we'll move on to something else, but I remember a while back, I may get in trouble with some people by saying this, but I remember a while back, I knew this cop. I liked him. He was a good guy, but he got in a love triangle with another female police officer, and it's been probably 15, 20 years or more ago. But anyway, he got out in the middle of the street and was shooting at the police. He was surrounded. I mean, just shooting round after round at the police. Okay. Right. Well, they held back. They didn't do anything to try to, because he was a fellow officer, And I kept thinking, because they broke in on live TV and was, showing it and all that. And I kept thinking to myself, and I like this guy, don't get me wrong, but I kept thinking to myself, if that had been me or some regular dude out there, they would have had him so full of holes by now.
Oh yeah,
You know,
absolutely.
and to me, I think that sets a bad example.
I do too.
Situation like that.
I do
you know?
too. And I think it's, when you have a personal relationship with someone, it'd be
Right.
like, I don't know, you're one of your best friends,
Right.
or someone that you continuously work with on
Right.
a day-to-day basis.
Right.
At that point, I think you're thinking about, oh my gosh, I don't want to shoot John,
Sure.
you know him, you have a relationship with him, you might know his
Right.
family, whatever, so that kind of scenario, it's kind of hard to determine what a good stance would be at that point. But, my opinion, if someone's shooting at me, I'm shooting back. So,
Right.
I don't care who
Where
it is.
everybody
honestly.
hunkered down and
Right.
and nobody got hurt out of the deal, but it was just the fact that hey,
But you're right.
There's no telling how many rounds that got fired off.
Yeah,
and,
you're right. It does
know,
look bad, but again, it's totally different situation when you have you come up to a scenario where someone's actually trying to kill you,
Right,
because of
right.
the badge you wear,
Sure.
as opposed to somebody that might be crushed by a
Right.
sweetheart or something,
Right,
that
right.
you're actually friends with. You're going to
Right.
try to talk them out of
Sure.
what they're doing, put down the gun.
Right.
Hey, this is stupid. Come on, John.
Right. Well, and it ended up good. Nobody got hurt, but
Right, which is good.
it's still just the principle of it. I just
agree.
I couldn't help thinking if that had been regular Joe Blow, he'd probably been out of here.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. No, I agree with that.
Now that we're talking about Rayshard, Brooks, I don't know if you've watched. I love Candace Owens.
I do too.
She gave a talk about George Floyd, and she brought up a good point in there, and it's something that's always bothered me for years. Why do black people martyr their lowest? They're criminals.
Right.
They're the only group of people that do that.
Right.
And I just don't get why they do that. And like Candace says, it's probably cultural or whatever, but I think there's
Well, it's relative. I mean, they're more likely to be involved in a shooting, or if it's a criminal, they're going to be killed.
Right.
Right.
As opposed to a historic figure or whatever.
Sure, but white people, and I know we've got a different experience. I get that. I mean, to a great extent. We don't have a long history of racism against us and all that, but white people don't glorify their criminals. I mean, we've kind of got into that period when I was, in the counterculture where they were glorifying Bonnie and Clyde and John Dillinger and people like that. But as a rule, we don't hold these people up on a pedestal. We don't bury them in gold caskets and give them
Right.
3 different funerals.
Well, the black citizen in Chicago with the shootings this weekend, 103
Yeah.
people were shot.
Right.
I don't know how many fatalities, 14 or something like that. And there was a 3-year-old
Right.
involved in that too. And like the guy said, where's the crowd now?
Yeah.
Right.
Mourning these people.
And you don't even know who
They're
these
mourning a
people are.
3-year-old child. Where are they now?
You don't even know who these people are. And I did
No.
a thing on Facebook where I was pointing out that I like you probably remember the situation where the kid in, I believe it was Chicago, he had a toy gun, he got shot.
Right.
Okay.
Yep.
Everybody knows his name, but they had a similar situation of a white guy. They saw a gun hanging out of the window of a motel room. He, cops are crawling down the hallway, ordnance guy on his stomach. He ends up getting shot. Doesn't have a weapon on him.
Right.
They find out it was a pellet gun, but you don't know this guy's name.
Right.
You can for every incident where you see what is you would consider unjust shooting of someone that's black,
Right.
you can find the same guy who's white being killed the same way.
And multiply that by several
yeah,
times.
and it's more so.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, the media never talks about a situation like that with a different race.
Right.
It's always that, which leads me to believe there's a motive behind it. There's an agenda.
There is a motive. Right.
It's a lot of it's political.
Right.
And it disgusts me actually because, look at the numbers. The FBI statistics on the more likelihood of a violent crime being committed by a person of color than a person that's white, for example.
Right.
For the percentage of their population versus the percentage of other population of nationalities or races, it's astronomical. And police are more likely to encounter a black man with a gun than a white man with a gun.
Right.
But you'll never hear about the other side.
Right.
And it's despicable to me, honestly.
But, I think we all in this room know that there's an agenda going on
Absolutely.
here. And it really, we're spouting out all these facts and logic, okay, which they're not interested in.
No, they're not.
And so the purpose of this podcast, that's not my goal. They are not my goal. The ones I'm talking to are the ones we call a silent majority. I'm starting to call them the silenced majority.
Yes.
Out there.
Pat, you've pulled over lots and lots of people.
Tons.
And I don't know what's out there in studies, but I'm sure there are studies on this. But what do you observe with pulling over minorities as opposed to whites and the behavior of the driver? What do you tend to notice occurs?
Way different. It's way different. Are
you always walking up to a tint? Is it always not to typecast, but is it always a tinted window?
Generally speaking, yes.
Okay.
And I will say that they will never roll a window down. Well, not never. There's a lot of minorities who are law-abiding, awesome citizens that are productive, and they're just like anyone else. But you have the criminal element that are always up to no good, and those are the ones I'm speaking of. They will have the tinted windows. They won't roll them down. They won't comply with demands. When you approach the vehicle, they're immediately cussing you or saying, "Why are you pulling me over? Because I'm black?" It's like, no, dude, because you rolled through that stop sign, or no, because you were doing 60 and a 40. There's a reason I pulled you over. And granted, there's that element in any race. Well, I say any race. I will say Hispanics are 99.9% they comply with everything. They apologize. Now, granted, a lot of the reason there is because most of them either don't have a driver's license, no insurance, all that good stuff. But they're very polite. When I'm pulling over a white person, I will say a lot of them, they know. They'll roll their window down. If it's tinted, they roll their windows down. They'll even crack the back window for me to look at. Hands are on the steering wheel. Some of them will pull their keys out and lay them on the dashboard.
Is it safe to say if they, with some education on the subject,
absolutely,
would there be behavior change?
I think there potentially could be behavior change with those who just may not know how to deal with the police. But you have a lot, and I see this. I see this in the schools that I'm in. I see this in public, everywhere. They're taught to hate police, just point blank. And I deal with a lot of these kids in my school where once they get to know me, they have an attitude change towards me. And they might say negative comments about cops, and I'll say, whoa, wait. You realize I'm a cop, right? Oh, yeah, well, you're different. Well, no, I'm not different. I'm just like every other cop out there. And that's part of the reason why, we're in schools is to try to build relationships with children.
Right.
So at an early age, they have a positive interaction with a cop. Because the only thing they may have seen up until then is police come up, knock on the door, and next thing you know, they're taking mom or dad away in handcuffs.
One thing I've noticed around when I'm on my job working is that these little black kids, white kids, whoever, you know, that are kindergarten age or whatever.
Right.
They love a guy in uniform.
Right.
They'll run up and, hey, officer, or
Right.
are you a police officer? You know, whatever. And I love that, you know, and I have to give y'all a lot of the credit because they're probably had an experience with, you know, an SRO somewhere or something like that, and
Possibly. Right.
but I'm thinking, put about 10 years on them, what happens to them?
Oh yeah.
You know,
By the time they hit middle school, man, they're all mouthy.
Yeah.
They're all trouble. You know. So, but you know, I'll say this too, because you know, when you said that, it reminded me, and not just working here around the mall, but working in anywhere when I'm in public. I've witnessed this more times than not. Little kids, a parent, they're with their parents, and the parents go, well, if you don't behave, he's going to arrest you.
I
hate it too.
Yeah.
And I'd usually squat down and say, no, I'd probably arrest your mom before you. No, as I, you know, but you know, I hate that because they're putting this.
That made it
putting
better.
this horrible,
Yes.
you know.
You're already putting it in their brain that we're bad. All we're going to do is arrest you if you act up. And it's like, you know, it's not that. That's
I want to hit the parent when they'll call me over and say, now this guy right here is going to take you to jail.
Yeah.
If you know.
Right.
And I just cringe when
I
do
do
that,
too.
you know?
I hate it. I hate it. I had these two little boys, and a quick story. But these two little boys, they're brothers at my school. They young kids. They're, you know what? There were three of them.
Right.
And they were in, when I first met them, I think first, third, and fifth grade or something like that. They hated police. They hated me just for wearing my uniform. They wouldn't talk to me. They wouldn't, nothing, you know, no high fives, no nothing. And they'd usually smart off to me. Well, as time progressed, and I just kept being nice to them, I wore them down. And next thing you know, they're my best friends.
Yeah.
Well, their dad shows up one day. He's walking by, and I'm out doing dismissal, and I say, "Hey, how you doing?" And I got shot the dirtiest look I've ever seen in my life. And he goes in the building, comes right back out with those three boys, and I go, "Oh, they're your kids?" And he looks at me like nasty again. And I said, "I love your boys." I said, "You guys have a great afternoon." And he's like, I had this confused look on his face that he was just staring back. Well, the more he showed up, the more I'd talk to him. And next thing you know, this guy needs gas money. And who did he approach?
Yeah.
You know, now I'm having conversations with this guy.
Right.
You know, I'd helped him out numerous times over the period that I you know, was in the school with his kids.
Right.
And hopefully, you know, I know I changed his mind towards me as an officer, maybe
Right.
not in general,
Right.
but you know, his kids are seeing positive interactions between his dad.
Right.
You know, and that right there, like, I felt like was one of the most positive interactions I've had with anyone.
Right.
To see the change with his kids and not just his kids, but himself.
Right.
You know, coming to me, asking me for help. And it was multiple times.
What they're saying, what it really comes down to is talking to each other.
Right.
That
communication. Yeah.
Communication.
that's the biggest
Yep.
problem that we have today.
Right
is
now,
that lack.
everybody is screaming.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's like, you know, just talk. You know, if you got a problem, okay, you may have had a problem with a half a dozen officers before me. You had some sort of negative interaction. It wasn't me.
Mm-hmm.
So don't hold me to blame, but talk about it. And I've had discussions with people who've had many negative interactions with police. And then they talk to me and they go, well, okay, I see you're one of the good guys. But there's a lot of us. There's a lot of good guys. You just had a negative interaction because of whatever situation was going on at the time, you know. But I'm going to put some of that on the police too. Some police, I would beg them, stop. Treat everyone with dignity and respect. And generally speaking, you'll get it back. Maybe not initially, but once they realize that you're not being a jerk, their tone comes down. And it doesn't matter what race they are. Once and me personally, like I've come across as a jerk to people in public, not as an officer, and then I realized, the more polite they were with me, I started realizing, God, you're being a jerk, and so I backed down. And it's like, I'm sorry. I ended up apologizing, which everybody's like, well, most everybody is like that. You have some that are just, hell bent on. Oh, excuse me, can I cuss?
Oh. Well, I mean that ain't
right. Okay,
that's pretty common.
they're hell bent on just being disrespectful to anyone of authority. Period. But respect. You just treat anyone with respect, and you generally get it back.
That's like I may have told you the story before, but I used to hunt Civil War relics years ago, and and I was hunting down off Woodmont Boulevard, and there was a yard that was being excavated, and I knew the Confederate line went right through there, and I thought that'd be a good place to hunt, so I went in there, and I should have went over to the next door. The house that was next to this pile of dirt was a pretty good distance away, and so I thought maybe it was just new construction or something, So anyway, about this time, this woman, mad as a hornet, comes running out of the house and get right in my face. And what are you doing hunting on my property? I got children, small children over here. I don't know who you are. Blah blah blah. And so the whole time I'm saying, "Ma'am, I'm sorry. I really should have asked you." And I mean, I was agreeing with everything she said, but I was doing it, calm voice and, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am, that type thing. And before it was over with, she'd calmed down enough that we actually stood there and had a pretty good conversation, And before it was over with, she, I said, she was in such a good mood when she started laughing, so if you don't mind, since I'm already here, would you mind if I continue hunting? And she let me hunt. And
it's all about attitude, man.
Yeah. I mean, that's what I'm saying. A lot of times it's just how you react to something.
It is. And there are some cops where, when they approach a vehicle or they're dealing with the public and the public is already elevated and they're yelling and cussing at the cops. There are some cops that will yell and cuss right back, and I've always found that's not me. I don't do that. I've been cussed at, yelling. It's like, okay, I hear you. I apologize. Hey, and I'm sorry I'm inconveniencing you, but this is why I'm here. This is why I pulled you over, whatever. And I've even had, I can't even count on both hands and both feet. It's very common, and I thought it was an original line from someone the first time they were cussing me out for pulling them over. I said, well, whoa, I apologize, but I'm not the one that was speeding. And, I had every intention of giving you a warning.
Yeah.
But, we can go this route if you want. Oh, I'm sorry. Can we start over?
Yeah.
Can we start over? Yes, we can. Please. I don't like confrontation any more than anybody else does, but it's part of my job, and I'm kind of forced into it a lot of times.
Well, let's change subjects here a little bit. I was listening to there's a guy on YouTube that he's got a good series. I think it's called Blue Collar something. I can't remember, but anyway, he makes he talks about different issues like race and other things, and but he made some good points. He's a musician, and he hangs around a lot of people that are left orientated. You know what I'm talking about, being a musician yourself. And but he was talking about the name of the title of the spot was let's talk about the N-word, And but he made the point, and I thought it was a good point. Now, at 70 years old, have I heard the N-word? Absolutely. I mean, growing up, people used to say the N-word like it was the word "the." I mean,
Right.
But I've noticed as I've gotten older, and things have changed, and a lot of it's been generational. You know, it's
Right.
like the older people, the World War II veterans, that are in their 90s now. You're more likely to hear that word out of that
Sure.
age of a Southerner than you would from maybe even my age or
Right.
younger. You know, it's more so in my generation too. You know, I got a friend that we were talking just the other day, and he popped off the N word. Now, I don't like it. I don't like
Right.
hearing it.
Right.
But I've developed the attitude over the year. What good is it going to do for me to stop him and preach to him, you know, about using that?
Right.
Because I like to build bridges. Because he'll say something like, because you know, we're friends, but I like to use that friendship to kind of convince. He said something. Well, you know, these ends do this and this. I said, well, yeah, but white people do that too.
Right.
I'm always trying to throw in the other side of the argument.
Right.
You know. But if I go to preaching to him about, you know, this guy's pretty much my age, and I'm not going to change his mind
No,
at this
you're not.
point, you know.
Right.
And but one thing I will say about this guy, you know, he's a conservative, and you know, I've always heard this thing about the Democrats are so much more progressive and all that. At least, you know, even though he uses the N words from time to time. I've asked him before, you know, I mean, he would vote for a black conservative,
Right.
you know, any day of the week if the right, you know, black person came along that he agreed with, you know.
Right.
And, but say, I've also seen, you know, I don't want to get too personal here because I have some extended family, not my own personal, I mean, my immediate family, but some extended family over the years, and friends that I know that are proud Democrats and been Democrats all their life because
Right.
Mama was a Democrat, and Daddy was a Democrat, and granddaddy was a Democrat. You know how that goes.
Right.
So anyway, they voted for every left-wing white politician that came down the pike until Obama came along. And then they couldn't vote for Obama.
Really?
I've known a lot of those, okay? I can point them out,
Yeah.
okay?
Yeah.
And well, you know, I know one relative in my extended family. She hated Bush so much that I was not allowed to even say his name in her house, you know. But yet she wouldn't vote for Obama.
Right.
Okay. And so I see that all the time. So, but anyway, what I'm getting to is this guy brought up a good point. He said, you know, really in his group of people that he's around, he doesn't hear the N word that much.
Right.
And really, to be honest with you, even my age, you know, I'm talking about today. I'm not talking about in the years past.
Right.
But today, I hardly ever hear it from a white person. Okay.
It's rare.
It's
Very
rare.
Yeah.
Okay. And I asked him before, you know, and he said, "Yeah, I heard it yesterday." You know. But the reason I wanted to bring this up is that black people say it all the time.
You're right.
Okay. And like this guy in this piece on YouTube, he was bringing up the point that that's a trick of the left, is that they encourage black people to say this word, which nobody should say.
Right.
Okay.
I agree.
But you hear it so much that it puts you in a position of you might accidentally one day slip in and say it because it's implanted in your mind, especially if you listen to rap music and stuff like that, you know.
Right.
Now,
Yeah, because it's with an A, not an ER.
well, yeah.
So there's a difference.
Well, okay.
Because they get offended with the ER, but not the A.
Okay. But now what I'm getting at though, it's just like profanity. I used to
Right.
work around a bunch of guys that cuss all the time. You know,
Right.
I mean, I worked at Colonial Baking Company, and these guys, I mean, the F word was like, you know, like a machine gun, you know.
Yeah, guilty.
And one day I was standing, talking to a guy, and we were talking. I think it was about politics or something, and I said the F word, and I stopped right mid-sentence, and I looked at him and I said, "Did I just say what I said? I thought I said." and I said it before I even thought about it because it had been implanted in my mind so much.
Right.
You know, and I don't talk like that. You
Right.
know, and
I try not to.
yeah. I've heard you a few times get excited. You know?
Yeah, just a couple.
Of course. But anyway, but now, am I making sense here? I mean,
Oh no,
you know,
absolutely.
You know, I think, you know, when people talk about racism, and see, one of the things I don't like what's going on with Black Lives Matter and, you know, these leftist groups and everything.
Right.
They're trying to redefine racism.
Right.
See, this started with Jesse Jackson.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Jesse Jackson. I used to have a friend when I worked over at a place in Nashville, and he was a very smart guy. Happened to be black, and he man, one of the reasons, although this guy had a big chip on his shoulder, and you know, he was so smart when it came to history that I loved talking to him because I had something in common with him. You know.
Right.
But it always seemed to go back to race. We couldn't get away from it, you know.
Yeah.
And but anyway, he was one day we was talking about racism, and he said, "Well, racism." He said, "What?" He said, "A black person can't be racist because he said because white people hold the power, so only they are able to be racist."
That's not the true definition.
And he got that from Jesse Jackson.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
That was his definition. Now, me, that is the most ludicrous thing I've ever
It
heard
is.
in my life.
It is.
Okay. Anybody can be racist. You know, you take the Japanese. There's
Absolutely.
nobody in the world more racist than the Japanese.
Yeah.
That's one reason that the war in the Pacific was so brutal between the United States and Japan, because they were racist. We had some racism too going on at that time.
Right.
And when you get two cultures like that together, I mean,
Right.
you know, they take no quarter, you know.
Right.
They thought the white man was the lowest thing on the totem pole. But,
And we may be.
well,
I don't. You know.
according to a lot of people on the left, we are, you know. It's in our DNA. You know, we
Right.
can't do anything about it. But anyway, now Black Lives Matter is saying, you know, they're coming up with this definition that if you don't say Black Lives Matter, you're racist.
Right.
You know.
Right.
And so what I don't like is the redefinition of racism in this
Right.
country, you know.
And I like. Was it you that posted the other day? If they said Black Lives Matter 2, as in TOO.
No, I don't think it was me.
Well, I read somebody's post the other day and
Yeah.
said that would make more sense if it was Black Lives Matter 2.
Right.
Also.
Right.
Yeah, I think that's one of the most. I consider that racist.
Oh, absolutely.
Every life matters. Period.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter what color you are. We all
Absolutely.
bleed red. You know, and if you go to church and believe the Bible, then you know God created everyone equal.
Sure. But they're doing away with equality
You're exactly right.
or equality under the law.
It's an agenda.
Right.
And it's, you know, and I think the vast majority of us realize this at this point.
Right.
I think a lot of, excuse me for saying this, but a lot of the younger generations are swept up with this, and I'm offended. You know,
Right.
Don't hold me accountable for something that happened 200 years ago.
Sure.
I mean, we could go back through history. I mean, my gosh, every race has been mistreated at some point in time by somebody, you know, and to just, oh, I thought you were going to say something, but to just point out one, in my opinion, is just wrong.
Well, there was a lady that worked for the New York Times that she had some terrible things to say about white people. I can't remember her name, but I think it was Sarah Jung. I was looking at my notes here to find out what I did with it, but here it is.
You know, don't forget, and maybe I'm you guys can disagree, but I think you will agree. This is not representative, I don't think, of black people.
Oh, no.
it's
no.
You know, this isn't really it's not their agenda. It's this,
No, we're talking about a minority.
It's left radical,
Right.
and
Absolutely.
it includes some blacks,
Right.
but it's white driven, white
Right.
money
Yes.
driven.
Right.
Absolutely.
So
Right. You bring up a great point, and that's what I wanted to get to eventually. We'll go ahead and deal with it now.
and they just got they're brainwashed. Unfortunately,
Right,
That's the
right.
thing.
Exactly right.
But you take, all right, let's take the removable statues. Let's take changing of the names of these forts named after Civil War generals, on down the line. I would like to see a scientific poll of black people as a whole, how they feel about it,
Right.
I guarantee you most of the time it's a white liberal
Yes.
in his ivory tower
Yes.
that comes up with this crap.
Yeah.
And they're the ones that they're sitting around thinking, well, what can I do today to change society? You know?
And not only that, but maybe to win votes.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean,
absolutely.
look at all this hubbub about Native American stuff. They
Right.
wanted to change the Washington Redskins. Anything that was offensive. But who are they offensive to?
Right.
Is it? Are you feeling guilty over something?
Right.
My wife's Native American.
Sure.
She doesn't mind the Washington Redskins. In fact, she gets offended anytime they try to do away with anything that has to do with her
Right.
culture.
Right.
I would be too.
Well, they did polling, and see, here's the difference between pandering,
Right.
and someone who'll stand up to these idiots.
Right.
Snyder, I can't remember his first name, that owns the Washington Redskins. He said, "Not no, but hell no, we ain't changing the name."
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Now, they've done polls, and even among American Indians, it's the support is in the majority for
Yes.
not changing the name.
The vast majority.
Right,
It's
right.
very few that said, yeah, I'd be okay if they change it.
Right,
They're not
right.
offended by it.
Right. Look at it. I'd like to hear from black soldiers going all the way back to World War II.
Right.
Okay. That trained at Fort Bragg, or they were in the 82nd Airborne, or trained at Fort Benning, or trained, Fort Gordon, Georgia, or wherever they trained. Okay. And I'd like to know were they offended by those names?
Right.
I would just like to know.
Yeah, I would too. And you would know this because I can't recall the regiment, but the regiment that was strictly of black soldiers.
54th
Yes.
in Civil War.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they defaced a monument
Yeah.
that was in their honor.
Yeah.
It's like, you guys have no idea the 54th Regiment was all black.
The one in the movie Glory.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, they don't even know what they're doing.
Yeah.
It's just like, oh, it's a monument. We got to tear it down or deface it,
One of the things that, as a Civil War historian, that it always blew my mind. If you're going to name a fort after a general, at least name it after a good one.
Right.
I mean, Fort Bragg, he's the one that lost the Civil War for you. Right. I mean, Fort Hood,
Right.
Fort Polk,
Yeah.
Well, Bragg had the battle here in Murfreesboro
Yeah.
on lock.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
he screwed it up.
Screwed it up. Look at Chickamauga,
Right.
I just never understood that, but anyway.
Right.
And see, that's another thing. This is what I think all this is leading to, is that I'll try to head toward the conclusion here. Is I don't want, whether it's the Second Amendment, whether it's monuments, I don't want to give the left a slippery slope ever.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Now, if you want to give you an example, there's a monument that sits out, or did sit out in front of the state capitol. It's Edward Ward Carmike.
Mm-hmm.
I'll guarantee you, if you walked around anywhere out on the street and you said, who was Edward Ward Carmack, they would not know. They wouldn't have a clue who the dude was, okay?
I wouldn't know either.
Well, okay, I'm getting ready to tell you. But, I mean, that statue has stood there prominent on the south side of the Tennessee State Capitol ever since as long as I remember. You know, it's been there since the early 1900s.
Right.
And they tore it down, okay? The mob did. Okay, Edward Ward Carmack was a politician around the turn of the century, in the late 1800s, turn of the century. You know, they used to have a big fight over wet and dry versus dry, you know.
Right.
Well, he personally drank like a fish, but he was for political reasons he supported the dry side of the argument, okay? And but he gave black civil rights workers, like the lady down in Memphis, I can't remember her name, but it'll come to me in a minute, but she led the anti-lynching crusade, and many of her friends that owned a grocery store down in Memphis were lynched, you know. Oh. And this guy gave her down the road. He was a virulent white supremacist, you know. There was nothing about this man that deserved honor,
right.
Okay? I think the only reason they put a statue up to him is he got in a gunfight with some newspaper editors on the corner of 7th and Union, and he got the worst end of the deal. He got shot, okay, and killed.
Right.
And so anyway, that's why he's got a monument, you know. Now, am I okay with removing his monument? Yeah, sure. You know,
right.
But not the way they did it.
Right.
You know, I mean, because we'll end on this. All we are learning right now through all of this is that the rule of law doesn't work anymore.
Right.
Violence is what works.
Yep.
And through violence, they're getting their way. The mob is ruling. Yep. And, all these people out here like us are intimidated.
Right.
You know, who's brave enough, other than me, I'm an idiot, but who's brave enough to put a Trump bumper sticker on their bumper? I've got 2 of them, you know, proudly. I've got a Trump hat, you know,
right.
And I'll wear them out in public, but that's just me. You know, right. I'm not going to let them silence me.
Me neither.
Okay. And that's the way we all got to be.
Right.
You know, we've got to reject, when it comes down to it, these new redefinitions of what racism is. We got to look people in the eye and say, you are full of crap.
Yep.
You know,
I agree.
And every time we hear something we don't agree with that's stupid, you let them know. Right. You know, you don't have to act a fool. Right. Just tell them, I ain't buying into your crap, right. You know, and stand your ground.
Yeah, absolutely. Whether they call you a racist or not.
Right. And for those who care and are willing to learn, have your crap together so you can explain to them when they ask you why you believe this way, that you can tell them. You know, we don't want to be like them and just base our answers on emotion, not on logic and facts. You know, so
that being said, if you're a white supremacist out there, do not take that advice.
Do what?
If I said that being said, if you're a white supremacist out there, don't take that advice.
Okay.
Just saying, like, hey, stand your ground. I don't think so, buddy.
No, right. No. Well, I'm saying stand on the truth. That's
on
right.
The truth, yeah.
On the truth.
There's the difference right there.
Yeah. Well, Pat, I appreciate you being with us again today.
My pleasure.
And Jimmy and my good buddy Connor over here.
Dadgummit.
But anyway, yeah, everybody have a good night, and thanks for tuning in.